My 6-year-old daughter spent 3 hours making a Mother's Day card for her grandmother. 3 hours. She sat at our kitchen table with her tongue poking out the way it always does when she concentrates, carefully cutting purple construction paper because she knew it was Grandma Gretchen's favorite color. She asked me how to spell beautiful and forever and love. She covered her little fingers in glitter glue and pressed flower stickers along every edge until the card sparkled like something from a fairy tale. When she finished, she held it up to me with the biggest smile I have ever seen on her face. Her eyes were shining. She was so proud. Inside, she had written in her careful, wobbly handwriting, "Dear Grandma Gretchen, thank you for being my grandma. I love you so much. Happy Mother's Day. Love, Poppy." She made me promise not to peek at first because she wanted it to be a surprise. Then she changed her mind and showed me anyway because she couldn't contain her excitement. She asked me if I thought Grandma Gretchen would like it. She asked me if I thought it would make her happy. She asked me if maybe, just maybe, Grandma Gretchen would finally want to spend time with her after she saw how hard Poppy had worked. I told her it was the most beautiful card I had ever seen, and I meant it. But inside, my stomach was twisting into knots because I knew something my daughter didn't. I knew that my mother-in-law, Gretchen Holloway, had never once shown my daughter an ounce of genuine warmth in 6 years. I knew that Gretchen had never bought Poppy a birthday present, never attended a single school play, never babysat her for even an hour. I knew that Gretchen referred to my daughter as Declan's child instead of her granddaughter, as if acknowledging the relationship was somehow beneath her. But I also knew that my daughter had a heart full of hope and a desperate need for a grandmother ever since my own mother passed away 3 years ago. Poppy remembered her Nana Lorene, remembered being held and rocked, and told she was the most precious girl in the whole wide world. She missed that. She craved that. And in her innocent mind, she believed that if she just tried hard enough, Grandma Gretchen would love her the same way. So I smiled and told her the card was perfect. I took a photo of it because I wanted to remember that moment, wanted to capture the hope in my daughter's eyes before the world had a chance to crush it. I didn't know then how important that photo would become. On Mother's Day morning, Poppy woke up before the sun. She put on her favorite purple dress without being asked because she wanted to match her card. She slipped the card into a special envelope she had decorated with hearts and stars. She could barely eat breakfast because she was so excited to see Grandma Gretchen's face when she opened it. My husband Declan wanted us to spend the day at his mother's house. I would have preferred to visit my mother's grave with Poppy, to lay flowers and talk about the woman who had actually loved my daughter unconditionally. But I agreed because I was still trying, after 8 years of marriage, to build some kind of relationship with Gretchen. I was still hoping that maybe this would be the day something changed. We arrived at Gretchen's house around 11 in the morning. It was the same as always, spotless floors, plastic-covered furniture, everything in its place and nothing out of order. A house that looked like a museum display rather than a home where a family gathered. Gretchen greeted Declan with a warm hug, the kind of hug she reserved only for her son. She barely glanced at me. She looked at Poppy and gave a small, tight nod, nothing more. Poppy didn't notice. She was too focused on the envelope clutched in her hands. Throughout brunch, I watched my daughter. She kept looking at the card, touching it, making sure it was still perfect. She barely touched her food. Her little legs swung back and forth under the table, and I could see her working up the courage to present her gift. She was nervous and hopeful, and so painfully vulnerable that it made my chest ache. After we finished eating, Poppy couldn't wait any longer. She slid off her chair and walked around the table to where Gretchen sat. She held out the envelope with both hands, her face glowing with anticipation. "Grandma Gretchen," she said in her sweet little voice, "I made this for you. Happy Mother's Day." Gretchen looked down at the envelope like my daughter had just handed her a dead rat. Her expression didn't soften. She didn't smile. She didn't say thank you. She took the envelope slowly, opened it with obvious reluctance, and pulled out the card. I held my breath. For one brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker across Gretchen's face. Surprise, maybe, or perhaps a hint of the emotion that any normal grandmother would feel when receiving a handmade card from a child who adored her. But then her expression hardened into something cold and cruel. "What is this supposed to be?" Gretchen asked flatly. Poppy's smile faltered. "It's a card. I made it for you, because you're my grandma and I love you." Gretchen stared at my daughter with eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Then she spoke words that I will never forget as long as I live. "I'm not your grandma," she said. "I don't know why your mother keeps bringing you here and filling your head with these ideas, but I am not your grandmother. Stop pretending." And then, while my 6-year-old daughter watched, Gretchen Holloway took that card, the card Poppy had spent 3 hours creating with all the love in her little heart, and she tore it in half. The sound of that paper ripping was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Poppy's face went white, then red. Her lower lip started trembling, and then the most heartbreaking sound I have ever heard came out of my child. A sob so deep and raw that it seemed to come from somewhere, ancient, somewhere no 6-year-old should ever have to access. She turned and ran to me, burying her face in my lap, her tiny body shaking with sobs so violent she couldn't breathe. I looked at my husband. Declan sat frozen in his chair, his face pale, his mouth slightly open. He said nothing. He did nothing. The man I had married, the father of my child, sat there like a statue while his mother destroyed our daughter's heart. I looked at Gretchen. She had already turned away, brushing glitter off her fingers like she was removing something dirty. She didn't apologize. She didn't show a single sign of remorse. In her mind, she had simply corrected a misunderstanding. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to react, to stand up and tell Gretchen exactly what I thought of her, to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she understood what she had just done, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had just inflicted on an innocent child. But I didn't. I sat there, holding my sobbing daughter, and I made a different choice. I wasn't going to give Gretchen the satisfaction of a scene. I wasn't going to let her see me lose control so she could later tell everyone how hysterical and dramatic I was. I wasn't going to play the role she expected me to play. Instead, I lifted my daughter into my arms. I stood up slowly. I gathered our things with one hand while holding Poppy against my chest with the other, and I walked toward the door without saying a single word. Declan scrambled after us. "Tamsin, wait, please. I'm sure she didn't mean it like that." I turned and looked at my husband, looked at the man who had just watched his mother shatter his daughter's heart and was already making excuses for her. "We're leaving," I said quietly. "You can stay here with your mother, or you can come with us. That's your choice." He came with us, but I barely registered it. My focus was entirely on the plan that was already forming in my mind. I wasn't going to yell at Gretchen. I wasn't going to send an angry text message or make a scene at the next family gathering. I wasn't going to do any of the things she expected, any of the things she could dismiss or twist or use against me. I was going to do something far more effective. Because here's what I knew about my mother-in-law that she probably wished I didn't. Gretchen Holloway cared about exactly one thing in this world, more than she cared about controlling her son's life. She cared about her reputation at church. She had been a member of Cornerstone Fellowship for over 40 years. She was a leader in the women's group. She organized charity drives and bake sales. She sat in the front pew every Sunday and made sure everyone saw her singing the hymns louder than anyone else. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being seen as a good Christian woman, a pillar of the community, an example of faith and family values. And I was about to make sure every single person in that church knew exactly who Gretchen Holloway really was. 3 days later, every woman in her Bible study group received a letter. Every elder on the church council received a letter. The pastor himself, Reverend Thurston Birch, received a letter. Inside each envelope was a photograph of my daughter's beautiful card, the one she had poured her heart into creating. There was a photograph of Poppy on Mother's Day morning, wearing her purple dress, holding her envelope, her face bright with hope and excitement. And there was a simple letter explaining exactly what Gretchen had done to her own granddaughter. By the following Sunday, Gretchen Holloway was standing in front of her entire congregation, learning a lesson she should have learned a long time ago. Some cruelties cannot be hidden. Some actions have consequences that no amount of church attendance can erase. And some grandmothers discover too late that the reputation they spent decades building can be destroyed in a single moment of heartlessness. This is the story of how I protected my daughter without raising my voice, how I taught my mother-in-law that words have weight and children have worth, and how 32 letters changed everything. To understand why that Mother's Day broke something inside me, you need to understand the history. You need to know what the last 8 years of my life have looked like, living in the shadow of a woman who decided she hated me before she ever learned my name. I met Declan Holloway at a friend's barbecue the summer I turned 26. He was tall and kind and laughed at my terrible jokes. He brought me a drink without being asked and spent the entire evening talking to me like I was the only person there. By the end of the night, I knew I was going to fall in love with him. By the end of the month, I had. What I didn't know was that Gretchen Holloway had already picked out a wife for her son. Her name was Bridget, the daughter of Gretchen's best friend from church. They had grown up together, gone to Sunday school together, and in Gretchen's mind, they were destined to marry and give her the perfect grandchildren she had always imagined. Bridget was proper and polished and came from the right family. She knew which fork to use at dinner and never spoke out of turn. I was none of those things. I grew up in a modest house with a mother who worked double shifts as a nurse and a father who fixed cars in our garage. I went to community college before transferring to a state university. I became a veterinary technician because I loved animals more than I loved money. I laughed too loud and spoke my mind and had absolutely no idea which fork was supposed to be used for salad. From the moment Declan introduced me to his mother, Gretchen made it clear that I was not welcome. She didn't say it outright, not at first. She was too smart for that. Instead, she made her disapproval known through 1,000 small cuts. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned my job, a tight smile when Declan held my hand. A pointed comment about how Bridget had just gotten promoted at her father's law firm, how successful she was, how she still asked about Declan every time Gretchen saw her. When Declan proposed to me after 2 years of dating, Gretchen didn't congratulate us. She told Declan he was making a mistake. She told him I wasn't good enough for him, that I would hold him back, that he would regret this decision for the rest of his life. Declan defended me, told his mother that he loved me and was going to marry me whether she approved or not. But he never fully stood up to her. He never drew a hard line. He just kept hoping that time would soften her. It didn't. Our wedding was beautiful, but Gretchen sat in the front row with a face like she was attending a funeral. She didn't cry happy tears. She didn't hug me. She gave a toast at the reception that mentioned Declan 15 times and me exactly once. When she was forced to say my name, I told myself it would get better. I told myself that once she saw how happy Declan was, once she got to know me, she would come around. I was patient and polite and tried so hard to earn her approval. I remembered her birthday every year. I sent her flowers on Mother's Day. I complimented her cooking and asked about her church activities and bit my tongue every time she made a snide comment about my family or my career. Then Poppy was born and everything changed, not with Gretchen, but with me. My mother, Lorene, drove 4 hours to be at the hospital when I went into labor. She held my hand through 18 hours of contractions and cried when she held her granddaughter for the first time. She called Poppy her precious miracle and visited every single week for the first year of her life. She taught Poppy to wave bye-bye and blow kisses. She sang her lullabies in Spanish, the same ones her own mother had sung to her. Gretchen visited the hospital once. She stayed for 20 minutes, held Poppy for approximately 30 seconds, and then announced she had to leave because she had a church meeting. She didn't offer to help when we brought Poppy home. She didn't babysit or bring meals or do any of the things grandmothers are supposed to do. She sent a card on Poppy's first birthday with a $20 bill inside. No personal note, just her signature. My mother was everything Gretchen wasn't. Warm where Gretchen was cold. Present where Gretchen was absent. Loving where Gretchen was indifferent. And then my mother got sick. The cancer diagnosis came when Poppy was 3 years old, stage 4, pancreatic. The doctors said she had maybe 6 months, and they were right. My mother spent her final months holding Poppy as much as she could, reading her stories, making her laugh. She recorded videos for Poppy to watch when she got older, messages of love and encouragement that I still cannot bring myself to play without crying. When my mother died, something shattered inside. Poppy, too. She was only 3, but she understood that Nana was gone. She would ask for her constantly, would cry herself to sleep calling her name. Slowly, the memories began to fade, the way they do for children that young. But the longing never went away. Poppy knew she was missing something, someone who had loved her completely. That longing is what made her reach out to Gretchen. That void is what made her spend 3 hours on a Mother's Day card for a woman who had never earned it. My daughter was searching for the grandmother love she had lost, and Gretchen responded by tearing her heart in half. That is why I couldn't let it go. That is why I did what I did. The car ride home from Gretchen's house was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Poppy had cried herself into exhaustion, her little body hiccuping with leftover sobs even as she slept in her car seat. Her face was blotchy and red, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. She clutched her stuffed rabbit against her chest the way she always did when she needed comfort. Declan kept talking. He wouldn't stop talking. His words filled the car like static, a constant stream of excuses and explanations that made me want to scream. She didn't mean it like that, Tamsin. You know how she is. She's old-fashioned. She doesn't express herself well. I'm sure if we just give her some time, she'll apologize. Maybe I can talk to her tomorrow when she's calmed down. She's been stressed lately with the church fundraiser. I'm sure that's all it was. I stared straight ahead at the road and said nothing. My hands were gripped so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles had gone white. If I opened my mouth, I was going to say things I couldn't take back. Things about how his mother had been cruel to me for 8 years, and he had never once truly defended me. Things about how I had watched him sit frozen in that chair while his mother destroyed our daughter, and he hadn't said a single word. Things about how exhausted I was from carrying the weight of his cowardice. So I stayed silent. And Declan kept talking. When we got home, I carried Poppy inside and laid her down on her bed. I took off her little purple shoes and pulled her favorite blanket up to her chin. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice raw from crying. "What did I do wrong?" My heart cracked right down the middle. I brushed the hair back from her forehead and kissed her gently. "You didn't do anything wrong, baby. Not one single thing. You made a beautiful card, and you were so brave to give it to her. I am so proud of you." "Then why doesn't Grandma Gretchen love me?" I had no answer. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some people are incapable of love? That some hearts are so hard and cold that even the warmth of a child cannot reach them? I couldn't tell her the truth. That her grandmother was a bitter, controlling woman who had never wanted Poppy to exist in the first place, so I told her the only thing I could. "Some people have trouble showing love, sweetheart. It's not your fault. It's never your fault. You are the most lovable girl in the entire world, and anyone who can't see that is missing out on something wonderful." Poppy's eyes drifted closed again, and within moments she was asleep. I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, watching her breathe, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was going to happen next. Declan appeared in the doorway. He had the decency to look ashamed, at least. "Tamsin, I'm sorry. I should have said something. I froze. I didn't know what to do." I stood up slowly and walked past him into the hallway. I didn't want to have this conversation where Poppy might hear us. "You didn't know what to do?" I repeated, keeping my voice low and steady. "Your mother told your daughter that she's not her grandmother. She tore up a card that Poppy spent 3 hours making, and you didn't know what to do?" I know it was bad, but causing a scene wouldn't have helped anything. You know how my mother gets when she feels attacked. It would have just made everything worse." I stared at my husband, the man I had loved for 8 years, and I saw him clearly for the first time. I saw a man who would spend his entire life tiptoeing around his mother's cruelty, making excuses for her behavior, prioritizing her comfort over everyone else's well-being. I saw a man who would let his own daughter be wounded rather than risk his mother's displeasure. Worse for who, Declan? Worse for your mother? Because I'm pretty sure it couldn't have gotten any worse for Poppy. He had no response to that. I walked into our bedroom and closed the door. I needed to be alone. I needed to think. My mind was racing with anger and grief and a fierce protectiveness that felt almost primal. My daughter had been hurt, deliberately and cruelly, by someone who was supposed to love her, and the person who should have protected her, her own father, had done nothing. I wasn't going to do nothing. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the photo I had taken of Poppy's card, the one that now existed only in fragments on Gretchen's floor. I looked at my daughter's careful handwriting, at the glitter and stickers and hearts she had placed with such hope and love. Then I started to plan. Gretchen Holloway had spent 40 years building a reputation as a devout Christian woman. She taught Sunday school and organized charity drives and sat on the church council. Everyone at Cornerstone Fellowship thought she was a saint. It was time they learned the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Declan snored softly beside me, completely unaware of the storm building inside his wife. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Poppy's face crumbling. I heard the sound of paper tearing. I felt her tiny body shaking against mine as she sobbed. By morning, I had made my decision. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did. After Declan left for a job site and Poppy went to school, I had the house to myself. I made a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and got to work. The first thing I did was pull up the photo of Poppy's card on my phone. I studied every detail. The purple construction paper she had chosen because she knew it was Gretchen's favorite color. The careful letters she had formed, asking me how to spell words she didn't know. The glitter glue that had gotten all over her fingers and made her giggle. The flower stickers she had pressed along the borders with such concentration. This card was evidence. Evidence of a little girl's love and evidence of a grown woman's cruelty. Next, I found the photo I had taken of Poppy on Mother's Day morning. She was standing in the kitchen in her purple dress, holding the decorated envelope against her chest, beaming at the camera. Her eyes were bright with excitement. She looked like a child who believed that today was going to be the day everything changed. Looking at that photo made me want to cry and scream at the same time. That hopeful little girl had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that in just a few hours, someone she wanted so desperately to love her was going to break her heart into pieces. I printed both photos at the drugstore that afternoon. I held them in my hands and felt my resolve harden into something unbreakable. That evening, after Poppy was asleep, I sat down to write the letter. I went through several drafts, crossing out anything that sounded too angry or accusatory. I didn't want to come across as vindictive or hysterical. I wanted to sound calm and factual. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. The final version was simple and direct. I explained who I was and my relationship to Gretchen. I described how Poppy had spent 3 hours making a Mother's Day card for her grandmother, using Gretchen's favorite color, writing every word herself despite barely knowing how to spell. I described how excited Poppy had been to give her this gift, how she had asked me if I thought it would make Grandma Gretchen happy. Then I described what happened, how Gretchen had looked at the card with disgust, how she had told Poppy that she was not her grandmother and to stop pretending, how she had torn the card in half while my daughter watched, how Poppy had cried so hard she couldn't breathe and later asked me what she had done wrong. I didn't call Gretchen names. I didn't make accusations about her character. I simply stated the facts and let the reader draw their own conclusions. I ended the letter by saying that I wasn't asking for anything. I just thought people should know who Gretchen Holloway really was when she wasn't sitting in the front pew on Sunday morning. I signed it with my full name. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't ashamed of what I was doing. The next challenge was figuring out who to send it to. 2 years ago, I had helped organize a fundraiser for Cornerstone Fellowship. I had been trying to get on Gretchen's good side, volunteering for every church event she was involved in, hoping that if I showed enough dedication, she might finally accept me. It never worked, but that effort had given me something valuable. I still had access to the church directory. I found it in an old email, a spreadsheet containing the names and addresses of every member of the congregation. I scrolled through it, identifying the people who mattered most, the women's group that Gretchen led, the church elders who made decisions about leadership positions, Reverend Thurston Birch, the pastor who had known Gretchen for over 2 decades. I made a list of 32 names. The next day, I printed 32 copies of my letter. I printed 64 photos, 2 for each envelope. I bought stamps and envelopes and spent an entire afternoon carefully addressing each one by hand. When I was finished, I looked at the stack of envelopes on my kitchen table. 32 letters. 32 chances for the truth to reach someone who needed to hear it. I drove to a post office 2 towns over. I didn't want any chance of someone recognizing me, of word getting back to Gretchen before the letters arrived. I stood at the mailbox for a long moment, holding the stack in my hands. A small part of me hesitated. This would change everything. There would be no taking it back. Gretchen would be humiliated. Declan would be caught in the middle. Our family would never be the same. But then I thought about Poppy asking me what she did wrong. I thought about her crying herself to sleep. I thought about the card that was now in pieces in Gretchen's trash can. I dropped the letters in the mailbox and walked away without looking back. The letters arrived on Thursday morning. I know this because my phone started ringing at exactly 9:47 a.m. I was at work checking on a golden retriever recovering from surgery when Declan's name flashed across my screen. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "What did you do?" His voice was tight, barely controlled. "Good morning to you, too." "Tamsin, I'm serious. What did you do? My mother has been calling me nonstop for the last hour. She's hysterical. She says people from church have been calling her all morning, asking her about some letter, a letter about Poppy, a letter you wrote." I leaned against the wall and kept my voice calm. "I told the truth, Declan. That's all I did." "You sent letters to her entire church? Are you insane? She's talking about suing you for defamation. She says you've destroyed her reputation. She's demanding we come over right now." I could hear Gretchen's voice in the background, high-pitched and frantic. For a woman who had shown zero emotion while breaking a child's heart, she certainly seemed to have plenty of feelings about her own predicament. "I'm not coming over," I said. And everything in that letter was true, so she can forget about suing anyone. If she's upset that people know what she did, maybe she should have thought about that before she did it. "Tamsin, please, just come talk to her. Maybe we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix. Your mother made her choice when she tore up Poppy's card. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I have to get back to work." I hung up before he could respond. Over the next 2 days, I learned what was happening through fragments of information. Declan came home each evening looking more exhausted than the day before. Gretchen had called him 17 times on Thursday alone. Members of the church had been reaching out to her, some expressing shock, others disappointment, a few demanding explanations. Opal Fenimore, the head of the women's group and someone Gretchen had considered a close friend for over 20 years, had called to say she was deeply troubled by what she had read. She asked Gretchen directly if it was true, if she had really told her own granddaughter that she wasn't her grandmother and torn up her card. Gretchen tried to minimize it, tried to say I had exaggerated, but Opal wasn't buying it. "Is there any part of that story that isn't true?" Opal had asked. Gretchen couldn't say yes because she knew I had witnesses. Declan had been there. He had seen everything. But the biggest blow came from Reverend Thurston Birch. He called Gretchen on Friday afternoon and told her that he expected her to address this situation with the congregation. He reminded her that Cornerstone Fellowship was built on principles of family, love, and compassion. What she had done to her granddaughter was antithetical to everything the church stood for. He told her that leaders in the church were held to a higher standard, and she had fallen terribly short. Gretchen tried to argue. She tried to explain that I wasn't a member of the church, that I had no right to contact anyone, that this was a private family matter. Reverend Birch listened and then said something that Declan later repeated to me, word for word. "Gretchen, that child is 6 years old. She made you a card because she loves you, and you tore it up in front of her and told her you weren't her grandmother. I don't care what your daughter-in-law did or didn't do. What you did was wrong, and you need to own that." Sunday morning arrived. Declan went to church because he felt he had to. I stayed home with Poppy. I didn't want to be there. I didn't need to witness Gretchen's humiliation firsthand. I just needed to know that it happened. Declan came home 3 hours later, looking like he had aged 5 years. He sat down at the kitchen table and told me everything. Reverend Birch had addressed the situation during the announcement period. He didn't name names explicitly, but everyone knew who he was talking about. He spoke about the importance of treating children with love and kindness, about how words can wound deeper than any weapon, about how those who claim to follow Christ must show his love in their actions, not just their words. Then he invited Gretchen to speak. She stood up slowly and walked to the front of the church. Every eye in the congregation was on her. These were people she had known for decades, people she had led in Bible study, people she had organized bake sales with and sat beside at countless Sunday dinners. She stood there in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I was too harsh with my granddaughter. I apologize for any pain I caused." It wasn't a real apology. She didn't admit what she had actually said or done. She minimized and deflected even in that moment, but it didn't matter. Everyone there had read the letter. Everyone had seen the photos. They knew exactly what had happened, and her weak attempt at an apology only confirmed it. When she returned to her seat, no one reached out to comfort her. No one patted her shoulder or told her it would be okay. She sat alone in a pew she had occupied for 40 years, surrounded by people who finally saw her clearly. In the weeks that followed, Gretchen's world quietly fell apart, not in any dramatic or explosive way, but in the slow, steady erosion of everything she had spent decades building. She was removed from her leadership position in the women's group. The church council met privately and decided that it would be best if she stepped back from her responsibilities for a while. Opal Fenimore took over completely, and from what Declan heard, no one objected. Several women who had been Gretchen's closest friends began distancing themselves. They didn't confront her or make scenes. They simply stopped calling. They stopped inviting her to lunch after Sunday service. They stopped saving her a seat at Bible study. For a woman who had built her entire identity around her church reputation, it was a devastation worse than anything I could have done to her directly. Declan struggled with all of it. He was angry at me for sending the letters without telling him. He felt caught between his loyalty to his mother and his responsibility to his wife and daughter. We had hard conversations during those weeks, the kind of conversations we probably should have had years earlier. I told him that I was done protecting Gretchen from consequences. I told him that his daughter needed to come first, always, and that if he couldn't commit to that, we had bigger problems than his mother's hurt feelings. To his credit, Declan listened. For the first time in our marriage, he truly heard me. He admitted that he had spent his entire life tiptoeing around his mother, afraid of her disapproval, desperate to keep the peace at any cost. He acknowledged that his silence on Mother's Day had been a betrayal, not just of Poppy, but of me. He promised to do better. It wasn't a perfect transformation. Declan still struggled with guilt about his mother. He still sometimes made excuses for her behavior out of habit, but he was trying, and that was more than he had ever done before. 3 weeks after the church incident, Gretchen showed up at our house unannounced. I answered the door and found her standing on our porch, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. The usual hardness in her face had been replaced by something closer to desperation. "I came to apologize," she said stiffly. "To Poppy. May I see her?" I studied my mother-in-law for a long moment. I searched her face for any sign of genuine remorse, any indication that she understood the gravity of what she had done. I didn't find it. What I saw instead was a woman who wanted to fix her reputation, not her relationship. "You're not here because you're sorry," I said calmly. "You're here because your church friends are upset with you. Those are two very different things." Gretchen's jaw tightened. "Does it matter why I'm here? I'm willing to apologize. Isn't that what you wanted?" "What I wanted was for you to love my daughter. What I wanted was for you to treat her with basic human kindness. An apology means nothing if you're only giving it to save face." "You had no right to send those letters," Gretchen snapped, her composure cracking. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. People I've known for 40 years are looking at me differently because of you." I nodded slowly. "And how do you think Poppy felt when you humiliated her? When you told her you weren't her grandmother and tore up the card she made for you? She's 6 years old, Gretchen. She cried for 2 days. She asked me what she did wrong. She asked me why you don't love her." Gretchen had no response to that. "When you're ready to be a real grandmother to Poppy, you can reach out. When you're ready to build an actual relationship with her based on love and not obligation, we can talk. But until then, you're not welcome here." Gretchen left without another word. She hasn't come back. Poppy is doing better now. Children are resilient in ways that constantly amaze me. She still asks about Grandma Gretchen sometimes, but less frequently as the months pass. We started a new tradition this year. Every Mother's Day, we visit my mother's grave together. Poppy makes a card for her Nana Lorene, and we lay flowers and talk about all the memories we have of her. I tell Poppy stories about my mother, about how much she loved her, about the lullabies she used to sing. Nana loved you more than anything in the world, I always tell her, and that love doesn't disappear just because she's not here anymore. It stays with you forever. Poppy smiles when I say that, a real smile, not the hopeful, desperate smile she used to give when trying to win Gretchen's approval. She knows she is loved, she knows her worth, and she knows that her mother will always protect her. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. Some people might say I went too far. Some might say I should have confronted Gretchen privately or given her another chance. But I had given her 8 years of chances. I had watched her dismiss and ignore and belittle my daughter for 6 years. I was done waiting for her to change. Sometimes protecting your child means making hard choices. Sometimes it means being the villain in someone else's story so you can be the hero in your daughter's. I can live with that. If you're watching this and you've ever been in a similar situation, I want you to know something. Your children are watching how you respond when someone hurts them. They're learning whether they're worth defending. They're learning whether their feelings matter. Don't teach them to accept cruelty for the sake of keeping the peace. Teach them that they deserve to be loved fiercely and protected completely. That's the lesson I want Poppy to carry with her for the rest of her life. That's the legacy I want to leave her. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me about a time you had to stand up for someone you love. I read every single comment, and your stories matter to me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. We post new videos every week, and this community we're building together means the world to me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are worthy of love, and so are the people you protect. Until next time.